We are certainly living in tumultuous times. During the tumultuous years of 1968 to 1971, I was a young teenager living in India. I was a long way from the protests here in the United States, but in some ways I was in a unique position to experience what was happening from another perspective. This would be my first experience that I can remember of being part of a system of white supremacy as a distinct minority of myself. I came to know firsthand what it was like to be left out, to not be considered, to actually have a second-class status as a white student in a school of 400 Indian boys. That in and of itself is not anywhere near a complete education, which in truth I think never ends. Because while I was a racial minority, oddity more like it, I still had vast privilege to be a white American, to have everything that came with it. I was just relating to someone the other day about how I can remember all the other Indians rode bikes and bullock carts or buses or these little ambassador cars which were black. They looked like little Beetles. They still drive them today. And here came the Americans in their big white Impalas. Or the UN, which was largely funded at that time by the United States, and their big Land Rovers, they were always white. That alone should have told me something. It would take me many years to learn that racism is part of being in the oppressor status. With the power that white privilege brings us, we are very much a part of the problem and a part of the solution. And I realize that what I'm about to say today may make a few of us uncomfortable, but I think that shows how prevalent our privilege is. The truth is that Unitarian Universalists have struggled with racism for decades. We're often given credit for being on the front lines of anti-racism work, but I can tell you from our history, our early attempts at racial justice were, in a word, disastrous. The few African American ministers who managed to work their way through our seminaries often found absolutely no pulpits open to them, or at very best, an associate or an assistant minister job at a larger church. In 1968, after the assassination of Dr. King, the Black UU caucus, which represented at that time almost 20% of our denomination, demanded representation on the Unitarian Universalist Association's board. They demanded subsidies for black ministers and $250,000 per year. This is 1968, mind you. $250,000 per year for 4 years to fund racial awareness and justice. It was literally $1 million proposal. The board initially rejected the proposal and said they would fund a one-time fund of $300,000 to be voted on by the General Assembly. At that time, another group, in addition to the Black UU caucus, another group rose up. They called themselves BAWA, Black and White Alliance. These were folks who believed that the solution to the racism problem in America was integration, that you'd be judged for the content of your character and not the color of your skin. In other words, to be colorblind. The people in the Black UU caucus said you can't really be colorblind because that's not actually how the world works. Over the objections of the Black and White Alliance, the UUA board reversed its course and proposed this $1 million solution be placed on the agenda to the Unitarian Universalist Association's General Assembly in 1969. That set the stage for the most dramatic General Assembly in our history. It began with a struggle over the agenda. So those of you who think that the agenda doesn't really matter, it actually mattered, because this proposal was at the last order of business, which would have been like the 5th day. And just like church, the longer you go for it, the less people you have. So it was in Boston. The official agenda placed this now proposal that also added an additional $50,000 for the Black and White Alliance because they wanted to be sure that they were funding both ideas. And members and supporters of the Black Caucus argued that you can't put this at the end of the agenda, we won't have enough votes. The vote to alter the agenda actually passed by a simple majority, but our bylaws required a 2/3 majority to change the agenda. In response, the Black Caucus declared, quote, unless the Assembly agrees to deal with these basic problems now and not next week, the microphones will be possessed and the business of this House will come to a halt. And sure enough, that's what happened. The floor microphones were seized by the Black Caucus supporters and the business session was forced to end with nothing resolved. The next day, a motion was made to reconsider the order of agenda. The motion lost this time. The Black Unitarian Universalist caucus members quietly walked out. After talking with leaders of the Black Caucus, Reverend Jack Mendelson addressed the assembly thus. He said, our Black delegates have now left the room. They have left this assembly and they have left our movement. Because life and time are short, and the assembly is returning to business as usual and to the position of Black people at the back of the bus. Mendelson then invited those who shared his feelings to join him down the street at the Arlington Street Church where he was the minister. In a show of solidarity with their Black co-religionists, more than 400 white Unitarian Universalist ministers joined Mendelson and walked out. The UUA leadership made overtures. Some of those people rejoined the General Assembly, but the damage had been done. Meanwhile, the new president of the UUA, Reverend Bob Crane, took the helm from the founding president of the UUA, Reverend Dana Greeley. Yes, your Minister Emeritus's uncle. Crane, unlike Dana, who was a very charismatic person, as was his nephew, Crane, being this mild-mannered and very scrupulous fellow, took over the denomination and took a look at the finances during this General Assembly, and he realized that our fledgling new movement, which was founded in 1961, was close to insolvency. The board, faced with this fiscal crisis and their own, of course, fiduciary responsibility to the institution, voted to reduce the grant of $1 million over 4 years to a one-time payment of $200,000, which was never fully funded. Within a few years, the Black Caucus and even BAWA fell apart because of the betrayal. And over a 4-year period, the association, the denomination, lost almost all of its African American members, save those who still favored this colorblind strategy. Friends, from whence we were 20% people of color, we were now closer to 8%. That was a long time ago. After the death of Michael Brown and the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, we came once again to the realization that we stood at the junction of power. Even though we were a small denomination, we had great influence. Black Lives UU, that is BLUU, came into existence at this time as an incarnation of an invitation to once again return to our principles and to our values. The service that I'm giving you today is just one part of a much larger movement. The solution to the sin of racism is not to pretend that we are colorblind, because we are not. We are not. Race infiltrates every part of our lives, from our money to our music and even to the way we conduct worship. At the time of Michael Brown's murder, and of course George Floyd's murder, which everyone caught on video in 2020, I was then serving a congregation in Connecticut, another predominantly white and wealthy congregation. Sensing we needed to start somewhere in 2020, realized this was during the pandemic, I made a decision, all by myself, to hang a big, huge Black Lives Matter banner in front of our church on the busy road. I knew, and Barbara, forgive me, that if I waited for the board and the congregation to make up their mind, this moment was going to pass us by and we would never get this chance again. Because at the time, we were the only religious organization in town making that decision. And my board, bless them, were, how shall I put this, unhappy. Members of the congregation complained, as they were completely within their rights to do, that there was no due process in making this decision. Our preschool partners, and they were more of a partner relationship than our tenants here, worried that this would incite violence to the property. The church in Westport is made entirely out of glass. All the walls are glass. They hired a security guard. I insisted the guard not be armed. And of course, as it is always known, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, so I apologized to the board, and I did mean it. I truly did, and I offered to take the banner down because we really had not had a due process. I had acted in a way that many would consider to be irresponsible. But here's the kicker. I didn't need to bother to worry about the banner being taken down because the next day it was stolen. Now the congregation was fired up. How dare they steal my banner? I insisted that we put another banner back right away. Fortunately, I had enough foresight because I'd heard of this happening with other UU churches that I ordered 2 banners when I ordered the first. So the next day, we put the banner back up. We called for a press conference. As I stood in front of the banner and I explained what was going on, I said, every time this banner disappears, we will be making a large contribution to the NAACP and Black Lives UU. 3 days later, that banner was slashed, and the word black on Black Lives Matter was crossed off, and the word all, as in all lives matter, was put up. I called another press meeting. I said I again would replace the banner and I couldn't make the donations. Of course, all lives matter. But black lives seem to be mattering a whole lot less than white lives, and that's the reason why we say Black Lives Matter. And by now, the Methodist and the Congregational churches in town had put up banners of their own. A 3rd and 4th banner went up in the ensuing months, until one day, while the police actually were parked in our driveway, the neighbor who comes out of his driveway and sees the banner said, "Oh, hell no," and the police had held him for questioning. The reality is that just because we proclaim Black Lives Matter doesn't mean we're able to dismantle the white supremacy culture in which we live. Unless there be any confusion about this, what's happening with immigration today and the current administration has as much to do with race as it has to do with what other issues they seem to be presenting. What we are seeing in Minneapolis right now is like a Selma again. One of the reasons we put up the banners, one of the reasons that I preach a sermon, one of the reasons that just this week a call went out to those who are able to come to Minneapolis on Thursday and Friday for a mass march of clergy and activists. And while I cannot go, I am personally supporting several of our younger colleagues in the area to be able to go. Because I realize that this is our opportunity. I also realized as I was talking to my colleagues, and I've been looking at the ACLU site here in PA, that this kind of action could be coming to Philadelphia very soon. And I am going to need to be able to stand there with you and any others who want to do that kind of work, to be able to assure that people understand that they are not alone. I received a phone call this week from a woman. She didn't leave her name. She said she was a Christian. And she wanted to thank us for taking a stand on all these issues that seem so important, because she seems so lost right now. And she said, here's the thing, I don't always know whether you get the recognition you do for doing the work and speaking the truth you speak, but you should know. And then she said, you're the most Christian church I know. I contend, friends, that anytime we're facing this intersection of injustice, which comes from all the intersections of injustice, that race is always part of what we have to deal with. There are people who live at the margins of our lives, the undocumented. the people with less socioeconomic means, those who do not have the privilege to disassociate the political from the spiritual. I've been dealing with this issue for many years now, where people say, well, that's too political and I don't want to hear about that. So I try to put our time together in the context of understanding that the political and the spiritual are part of a whole. And while I'm not going to be partisan about this and beat us over the head with it, I do think it's important for us to understand why the two are together. Because the political is about power. And power then influences morality. And morality speaks to the values that we hold true as UUs. That's part of our faith tradition. Amen. And to deny a person of color, for instance, the right to speak on a political issue in a spiritual space is to deny them their identity, friends. I mean, look at the civil rights movement. There was no distinction between the political and the religious for Dr. King. He was a minister. Was he any less spiritual because he took a political stand in dealing with the civil rights issue at the time? Or I look at the African American church and I try to imagine the church separating the political from the spiritual, and it boggles the mind. How is that possible? What I think Dr. King was expressing, what I think we are still expressing, is that there is a need for redemption in America. It's an old-fashioned word, the need for redemption from what I think is the original sin of racism. We've made some modest progress in recent years as UUs. We are more intentional than we've ever been about white privilege and the system of supremacy that keeps it there. This is good. But given the many missteps and failures over these last 60 years, I think we have a long way to go. And a step that's more vital than ever now is that we understand our place in things, even as we are holding on to joyful resistance, which I think is an important understanding of who we are. Even as we're holding on to that, we have to realize that we are facing a coup, an authoritarian oligarchy. We're seeing the erosion of democracy. We're seeing amassed federal agents that are not even being trained anymore, arresting brown and black people in Minneapolis. Doesn't matter whether they're citizens. One guy got arrested, he had his passport on him. Didn't matter. At the center of all these intersections, we need to be there because we are the people that we've always been waiting for. Martin Niemöller, the Lutheran pastor during Nazi Germany of what was then known as the Confessing Church of the Lutheran denomination, which was a radical splinter group that opposed Nazis and their Reich Church, famously wrote, and you've seen this before, first they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. And in fact, they did come for him. And they came for his better-known colleague, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and they both died at the hands of the Gestapo. Beloveds, realize this. Realize the world we're living in is falling apart. But I do not think that means the world is gone. I think it is being reformed even in our midst. And then I realize, because I am your minister, that some of your personal lives are also falling apart. And that is why I've put down in my signature line on my emails, this is the place where we practice joy as an act of resistance, because we need to have that. That's true. And we express that joyful resistance when we sing, when we dance, whenever we gather in love and service, when we offer warm coats and food and welcoming youth and welcoming queer people and welcoming anyone in need of sanctuary. And friends, this is good and true and right. We even practice resistance when we need to take a rest. But our journey from BAWA to BLUU is calling us to go further still. It may be to move beyond words alone, to put our bodies on the line, as is the call to Minneapolis and other calls that are coming. Last week, a short video making the rounds among my colleagues had the Episcopal Bishop of New Hampshire, not exactly a hotbed of social action, the Right Reverend Rob Hirschfield, speaking to a group of activists and Episcopal clergy in a tent on a cold day, and he said this: "As someone who is a man of profound historical privilege, as one who has made statements that I have to say have been really good and eloquent, we have not moved the needle one bit." He went on to say, "We are now engaged in a horrible battle that is eternal, that has gone on for millennia. As soon as the Christian church became linked to the empire by Constantine in the year 325, the church immediately became corrupt. And the message of Jesus' love, compassion, commitment to the poor, the outcast, was immediately compromised, and we have lost that voice, and we are now, I believe, entering a time, an era of new martyrdom." Renee Nicole Good was the latest of martyrs. He said, "We know of the women, the Mary Knowles sisters, who stood alongside the poor and oppressed in El Salvador, who were brutally raped and murdered in the name of Jesus. We remember Oscar Romero in a mass that he called upon the death squads of El Salvador to lay down their arms and risk excommunication, who was martyred the next Sunday at the altar. The bishop said, "I've told the clergy of the Episcopal Diocese of New Hampshire that we may be entering the same time of witness. I've asked them to get their affairs in order, to make sure they have their wills written, because it may be now is no longer a time for statements, but a time for us to use our bodies to stand between the powers of this world and the most vulnerable." His words have been haunting me all week. I did check to see whether my will was in order. I've made many eloquent statements in protest to racial injustice, in all the injustices perpetrated by this government towards its citizens and those who are here legally and illegally. But the time for words is coming to an end, or at least it's not enough, because the next phase of the journey will be a continuation both of the sanctuary we provide and a going out into the world with our bodies. This is why on February 1st, David Brown will begin to organize civic engagements for us to participate in direct actions in support of Black, brown, and queer lives. We will be asked to do more. You can guarantee it's coming. And we need to be ready, because this is our journey and this is our time. Are you with me? Yes. Amen.